If you're thinking of starting up a business, do it because it's the best experience that you will have and you will learn a lot from it. However, protect yourself because you never know what happens in a business, right? Most businesses, unfortunately, fail. And no matter how good you think your idea is or how good you think your capabilities are, there's a big chance that it might go wrong. Because if you protect yourself financially and you plan financially for yourself before you go into doing it, you've got better headspace to be able to actually make the business a success. If you're worried about money and everything else, you might actually fail simply because of that point, not because your idea is not good. If there's no focus, no dedication, generally, as a rule of thumb, it never really works.
Welcome to the Sandpit Startups podcast, where we journey into the minds of the brightest and the best founders the region has to offer. We're here to connect the founders in the studio with the founders listening at home, and we sincerely hope the next half an hour or so motivates, educates, or inspires you. And if it does, you know what the follow button is.
Today we are with Claudio Esposito, one of the co-founders of Carasti, an innovative monthly car subscription app that provides flexibility, affordability, and convenience. So join us on this episode where we talk about his venture and also discuss strategy, team building, and fundraising. We're glad to have you on this episode today, Claudio.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, pleasure's all ours. So Claudio, if we go back to those early days, or even before the early days when there was literally just an idea, what was it that sort of came to be in terms of where the idea came from? Like, was there any particular moment where you're like, okay, car purchasing or having a car needs to be a rental agreement?
Yeah, I mean, it came over a series of events, right, that happened in my journey owning cars and renting cars and moving to the UAE. And I think the first part of the journey was when I moved to the UAE. Like many of us, we just set up our bank accounts. We don't have any credit history. So you're not able to necessarily buy that car. I didn't have that amount of cash lying around to just say, hey, I'm going to buy a car outright. So I wanted a car loan. I couldn't get a car loan. So what do? You go and rent a vehicle. So you look at what the monthly rental options there are in the market. And generally, it was all relatively basic cars, nothing too exciting. Rental car companies' revenue model ultimately is to get a lot of metal on the road as, the cheapest metal on the road as possible, get people from A to B and monetize on daily, weekly, and sometimes monthly contracts. So customers that are looking short-term don't necessarily care about the features or the color of a car. If all the car's white and it doesn't have alloy wheels and it doesn't necessarily have a screen, it's like, whatever, it takes me from A to B. So at that point, I obviously rented a car. Then after that, after a few months, I was looking for a different solution. So I bought a car finally, and I was able to get that car loan. Now, I got into that car, drove it for 3 years, and when I looked at the costs after that of what happened in the process of owning a car, all the servicing, all the insurance, my insurance kept on going up, even though I had no accidents, but my insurance went up year on year here. And when you start calculating actually how much it costs, plus the depreciation on the vehicle, I bought a Porsche, right? So they just don't hold their value really well. Here you need to buy Toyota, Nissan Patrol, those ones you're safe with. But unfortunately, I went the German route and failed. So lost a lot in terms of the depreciation. And then the moment it came out of warranty, it started causing me problems. It's like it's timed. It was bad luck, clearly.
It's like they know when it's going to do that.
I don't think Porsche are planning it, but I was unlucky even in this case. But I think many people are unlucky, right? I mean, my transmission cost a fortune to raise a 50,000 dirham part, plus obviously getting the labor on top.
Yeah.
So this is just too painful. And at that time, I was traveling a lot to the US. So I was in my previous company. We were there on a quarterly basis because it was a US-based company. So we'd have management meetings, sales kickoffs, all that kind of stuff across in the US. And a lot of my colleagues there, I'd see them driving new cars all the time. And I'm like, how the hell are they doing this? Like, what am I doing wrong? So I started asking them, like, oh, we're using car subscription players. Oh, we use this, companies like Turo, which are kind of peer-to-peer car rental. And that's when the idea started to get planted. You know, sorry, a long way around to get to your to get to the answer. But I started to see these things happen in the Western world, and thought, God, we've got so many supercars in the UAE. There's so much excess vehicles that could go onto a peer-to-peer platform, and obviously the car subscription route would work really well because people that are new into the market, or even residents that don't want to necessarily own a vehicle and want a full service solution, only have rental, where you don't get the variety of cars that you actually want to drive. Leasing didn't really exist at the time. So this was the solution. So I came back super excited from these trips and started to plan ultimately and see how we could build something. And over the course of around 9 months, I built a business plan, got an initial team together, figured out how we could build an app. Never built an app before, so that was quite a journey. And that's it. We just, I left the corporate world behind me and took a plunge and thought, let's make this happen. And since then, we've put tens of thousands of customers on the road, and happy customers on the road, should I say, in brand new vehicles, really well spec'd cars, all new, zero headaches, pay a fixed monthly fee. And it's really starting to become the way that people want to get on the road, especially now with cars going up in prices. Seriously, right? You've seen in the last 2 years, cars, generally the same vehicle you would have bought 2 years ago is 30% more expensive. Unfortunately, none of us are probably earning 30% more than what we were 2 years ago. I'm definitely not. So that's the thing. It's more difficult to buy cars, and this is where the world is going. Right, inflation is not going away. Our salaries are what they are, and people are looking for alternatives. So that's why businesses like ours seem to be thriving at the moment.
Well, it's certainly the perfect storm for you guys. We frequently see that a lot of great ideas come from something that already exists elsewhere in the world. It's just introduced into a new market that's ready for it. What is it about Dubai, would you say, that made it, or the UAE, let's say, or even the MENA region, because now you're in Saudi, what is it about this region that you decided, actually, we need it here? Obviously, it didn't really exist before. And you already lived here, I believe?
Yeah, I'd been in the region for about 5 years already when I set up Carasti. So yeah, obviously the fact that I lived here helped, but actually that wasn't the main reason.
Right.
Obviously it's a very transient economy, and the majority of the population here are expats. And based on that, people don't necessarily like the idea of ownership as much. And so there was already a big rental market, and the potential to grow that into, leasing into new cars, better specs, and widen the scope of what people can get into without buying. That kind of made sense to me. And then Saudi, the way it's going, we all know the growth and the investment that's going into that market. And very soon, already now, actually, more and more expats are going there, and they all need vehicles, and they don't know how long they're going to be there. No one moves to a new region and thinks, I'm going to be there for 20 years, right? Everyone I've spoken to that's ever moved to Dubai says, we'll come for a few years and see what happens. And then most of the time they're still here after 20 years, but you just don't know. So initially I thought to myself, providing a solution to new people that come into the market that aren't necessarily sure, but, still want to drive something nice. That was where the gap was.
We're going to take a brief break to hear from our sponsor, Middle East Advisory Partners, top-tier advisors servicing the owner-managed, family-run, and SME sector. Here we have with us Paul Donnelly sharing his tip of the episode.
Effective marketing. Choose marketing channels wisely, based on your target audience. Consider content marketing, email campaigns, influencer collaborations, and SEO strategies. Analyze the performance of each channel and refine your approach accordingly, but don't overlook the power of traditional marketing, such as brochures and flyers.
If you'd like an experienced advisor on your team, reach them at me-advisorypartners.com.
So I know you mentioned you've never built an app before.
Yeah.
And I certainly remember back in those days, the website you had and then the first iteration of the app. It was, I hope you wouldn't mind me saying this, but it was far from perfect. But you certainly went for it anyway. And I love that mindset where it's done is better than perfect. Let's get some traction and maybe even use this prototype to show to investors and try and get the ball rolling that way.
Yeah.
What do you feel like there's a sense of importance of just getting the first iteration out there and like getting that feedback from the market?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so it was difficult for me to do,
Yeah.
if I'm honest. And we probably took 6 months too long to even get our non-perfect app out.
Wow.
In that process. But yeah, that's one of the big learnings is just get something to market. All people care about, people as in customers,
Yeah.
ultimately is if a product is good and is good value. How shiny and glitzy your app looks, or whether the alignment on your website's perfect, or the color palette that you chose for your initial branding makes sense. These are all things that obviously if they're good and high quality from day one, happy days.
Yeah.
But we launched, as you rightly say, with questionable branding and a questionable looking app, but it worked. It allowed people to book. The value was there because the product was good and priced well.
Yeah.
And we grew with that questionable app and look and feel up to around 400 or 500 customers, I believe.
Yeah.
And only then we raised our first round of funding. We started to invest in our own dev team. It wasn't outsourced. Our own designers. We've rebuilt everything again from the ground up to make it scale, because the first version of it, unfortunately, wasn't built to scale. It was built just to put something to the market quickly, prove a point, raise some money, and take it from there.
Yeah.
But it's better to have such a product rather, it could be that you have a perfect app, but if there are no users for it, and if you don't have traction showing from that app, there's no point having the perfect app. It's all that investment of time, which could be used to probably iterate the app, pivot perhaps.
Yeah, that's it. You want to get to market quickly. That's it, and you want to do it as efficiently as possible, because you don't want to launch a product when you're already hundreds of thousands of dollars in the red because of all the time you spent in developing that and hiring super senior teams and internal developers. Like, outsource as much as you can when you start. Get something quick and dirty out there, prove a point, start generating revenue, and then invest.
We're going to take a brief break to hear from our sponsor, Inheden. Hey there, visionaries and dream chasers. Meet Inheden, your ultimate partner in turning your visions into digital realities. They're not just another IT company, they're your growth partners and a tech angel invested in your success. Are you looking to expand your business or create an unforgettable user experience? Well, Inheden has your back. With optimized software development, cutting-edge design, and a blend of in-depth research and marketing, they're here to help empower your ideas. If you're curious, head over to inheden.io. That's INHEADEN.io for all the details and get started with your dream project today. Dream, empower, inspire. Inheden. Not to bash on the app too much, but one thing that stuck in my mind is when you were selecting the slider for like how much you wanted to pay monthly, it very quickly went from like 0 on one side to like a couple 100,000 on the other. So like to find anything within like 10,000 was like super finicky.
Yeah.
But I hope you forgive me. But if you look at where things are at now, it's clear that, like a lot has been invested into the branding and the development, the UI, UX, all that good stuff. But when particularly would you say is like a good time to invest in that? Is it, as soon as you get all your investment, or is it, maybe after you get that investment, you spend it on generating a customer base? Or
well, look, I think there's you hit a critical mass in terms of customers, and you need to scale right at this point. So you see that customers are coming on faster and faster and faster every month, and your processes will break. There's no company that starts from day one and keeps the same processes all the way through to being $1 billion company. It just doesn't work. So you have to, it's not just an evolution that happens once. We're still evolving now. So the processes we built 2 years ago now are starting to break, and we're starting to restructure them as we're becoming a scale up. Ultimately now, we're no longer a startup.
Yeah.
And so, yes, it's always an iteration. You're always making it better. You're always refining. It never ends. That's the reality of it.
Like, there is no point. It's just always.
Yeah. It's. I mean, you feel it, right? You realize that there's always a better way. And sometimes it's not because your process necessarily is broken. It's because technology has evolved, and it allows you to make a process which maybe was earlier was a bit tedious, to streamline that and simplify it. So you need to be on top of that, and consumers are also quite picky nowadays. If one solution allows you to book a car and do it in the space of 3 minutes, and another solution, takes
lesser.
1 minute,
Yeah.
you're going to go with a 1 minute.
Yeah.
So we're now in a phase where, as a business, because we're putting quite a lot of high value cars on the market, we're having to credit check people. And I think, back in the day, people would say, WhatsApp you or message you and say, hey, please send me your statements on WhatsApp. And we're like, we can't do this. Like, it's not, we cannot possibly be requesting, we're a digital service and we can't break that journey and obviously ask people for their statements. So what are we doing today? Today we're building a process which we wouldn't have thought about 3 years ago through open banking, where a customer connects their bank account, OTP arrives, we get the data instantly of their main current account, and we're able to analyze the customer's spending in real time. And within the space of 15 to 20 seconds, it gives a result saying, this is what you're approved to spend on Carasti.
Yeah.
And so that means we don't have to hire more people to be reviewing these statements. We don't have to break the process of a customer. And the customer doesn't necessarily have to feel embarrassed, let's say. Because there's not someone looking at it. It's just technology working in the background. There's no one at Carasti that's ever looking at people's numbers or how much they earn or whatever, because there's a certain element of privacy that people want. You don't necessarily want to share all that data with a stranger or a company.
Absolutely.
So digitalizing it makes it a much better experience. And so if you're ahead of the game with that, even though, some competition aren't credit checking customers, but, at the end of the day, if they want to have a riskier customer profile and want to absorb that risk, they're going to have to put that into their pricing for the car. We will be able to offer better pricing because we know the risk profile is managed, and therefore we don't need to cushion our pricing just in case the customer defaults or anything happens that way. So I think it's always better to invest in processes and simplifying your technology processes as much as you can.
Yeah. Because I think that investment is also safeguarding you, because we spoke off camera just before in terms of like some nightmare situations you've had with customers, how much risk you're actually taking on. We'd love to hear some of those. I'm sure the viewers would like to hear some of those stories, because they were just too good to keep off camera.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, without naming names, but we have scenarios, where unfortunately customers do default, and we have processes to get the cars back and to manage those elements, right? And the key thing is, as a company, you waste, in terms of insight, you waste so much time dealing with a small portion of customers which are defaulting and don't want to collaborate and are entitled and want to keep driving the car even though they can't afford to pay for it, and will find any excuse to try and delay the payment and then not fulfill their promise to pay on that particular day. And when we started the business, quite frankly, it was very mum and pup. I'd be like, I knew all the customers by name when I started. Up until we were about 400 customers, I was doing all the invoicing myself for tolls and fines. Whenever I saw a damage charge come in, I'd call the customer, I'd WhatsApp him myself, be like, hey, buddy, I've seen you've got this damage charge, just to let you know. And I'd have a real human touch with the customers, and I'd preempt any problems, inform them, and it was easy to do. Obviously, as you scale the business, that becomes more difficult to do, right?
Absolutely.
And you need more and more people to be able to interact with customers. And when it comes to defaulting, obviously the more customers you have, the more customers are defaulting every day.
Yeah.
And so you need a whole debt collection team behind this.
Yeah.
And no one wants to be doing this. No one wants to spend their time chasing money and chasing big outstandings, because the other challenge is, where we really see the problem is when cars are given to a customer. A customer gives their car to somebody who's not on the contract. Because then the biggest nightmare is if that customer crashes the car, the insurance isn't going to cover it because they weren't on the contract.
Yeah.
And there are some cases where we've had really bad accidents and the car's a total loss. And that becomes ultimately, yes, the responsibility of a customer who signed the contract. But if they don't have the money to cover that, as Carasti, we have to cover that cost up front, obviously, and then work out a payment plan with a customer to make all of these things happen. So the reason we're putting, processes in place, I guess, is as the business has evolved, we're putting more and more expensive cars on the road. Right now, you can get a G-Wagon on subscription from Carasti, right? And that's 25,000 dirhams a month. It's, you know, not a small sum. And obviously, if someone's defaulting on 25K, that's a very different model to someone defaulting on, you know, 2K on Toyota Yaris. Right, you can stomach a 2K more than the 25K, right? So we just need to be careful, obviously, as we're growing a business, to make sure that you grow it sustainably and that you don't catch yourself out. Because having amazing growth and an extra 500-600 customers every month with low barriers is great for initial revenue.
Yeah.
But then all the trouble that you face at the other end, because you're not gating it and not making sure that you're bringing on the right customer profile, let's say, that's enough to cripple you.
Yeah.
Right. So especially when you're reaching the scale that we're at. So that's the thing. With scale, you need to put more rigid processes in to protect yourself financially as well. So that's where we're at now.
I know there's a lot of small businesses that, when they start out, they're just like hungry to like get clients and things like that. So they'll start accepting like really, not ideal clients and people that are like raising red flags immediately. But, they're so hungry for that initial bit of like revenue so that they can start snowballing the business. But,
we definitely did that. 100%.
Yeah. But then you say it comes back and bites you. So
it does eventually. And at the beginning, as I said, because you're doing low value, it was much lower value cars at that point. We were essentially a car rental aggregator, right? So we worked with car rental companies and put their cars on the road. Right now, we essentially go to a dealership, get that car from a dealership, it gets purchased on behalf of a customer, and it gets put on the road in their name through our car rental entity. So it's a completely different business model, right? So where now we're actually owning that whole process, versus before the risk was on the rental car company. It's their asset. If something happens to the asset, within our contracts, there was a shared liability, and we knew the maximum our liability would be a certain amount, right? So it was relatively risk-free, versus now, everything is our responsibility, and the business, obviously, to make the business has much better margins and is much more healthy from a unit economic perspective by owning the whole chain, right? But this is ultimately where the risk really raises, and you have to be super, super careful as you make these transitions in your business model to be asset light, to be a bit more asset heavy, let's say. To make sure that the right people are coming in.
Talking about assets, right? There will be capital involved in this. So you mentioned now, Claudio, that you're a scale up. So if we go back a bit from the startup days, it's safe to say fundraising was the fuel to your car subscription app. And could you mention your journey with the fundraising? Because you've had a mix of equity financing, a bit of convertibles.
Yeah, so initially it was self-funded, myself and my co-founder.
Bootstrapping.
And then, we bootstrapped to a certain extent. And then I started calling my buddies and friends, family, and like, look, this is what we're doing. We're going to change the world. Sell the dream, right? And a lot of people came on board with the dream, because ultimately, we fundamentally believe, and all of our investors are behind this as well. Clearly, otherwise we wouldn't have put the money in. But we believe that by 2030, the majority of people won't own cars anymore. They will be in some form of subscription, lease, whatever you want to call it. But it will be an access, not ownership model for mobility. And we're very quickly moving in that direction. So we outlined our vision for the future to, everyone, whether it was, mum and dad or, an ex-colleague or people that we'd done business with before, and rounded up a fair sum of money actually from angels. And that got us to a point that allowed us to invest in our marketing presence and grow the business, as I said, to around that 500-600 subscriber mark. At that point, we started to generate interest because people knew who we were in the market, and we started to generate interest from investors, and people started to knock on our door, actually.
The other way.
So it was we were looking, but the lead investor that came in, Net Ventures, actually knocked on our door. and it was from a LinkedIn introduction, and we started talking to them, and they specialize in auto startups. Basically, that's all they've invested in, and prop tech as well.
Okay.
So one of the interesting things is they add a lot of value because they get the space. They've done it before. They're invested in other car subscription platforms elsewhere as well. And then our second investor came on the back of this. We were already talking to them, but because we had the lead investor, once you have the lead investor and you have a commitment, getting the second investor over the line is pretty quick
easier,
because obviously the due diligence process is underway. Someone's already taken responsibility to vet the company and has made a commitment. So it makes it a lot easier for people to follow on with a smaller amount.
Yeah.
Right.
Then Rua came on board, which is a Saudi VC firm. And that's the point where we started to go into Saudi as well, because with our experience, we leveraged that obviously to get into that market. And now Saudi's become a B2B market for us. We only play B2B for now. But that will change into a B2C market too at some point in 2024. So it's work in progress. But moral of the story is that our investors and the people we chose as well was more around, you got to be careful who you bring in because there's smart money and there's frankly stupid money.
Yes. And
as a founder, you really do need people around you because it's a lonely existence, and there's not really, you don't really get much advice, or you're not able to talk to people internally because you are the company. So actually creating that ecosystem around you of investors and people that you can throw ideas at, and people that can add value. They've gone through certain elements before. Is super important. So making sure that you get people that understand your industry and have a good network in that industry, and also can follow on from a point of investment. Because once you get a good investor on board, as long as your business is growing and going in the right direction, the investor generally will follow on and want to put more money as a business is growing in, because they don't want to dilute their ownership.
Yeah.
Right. So it's important to get more investors in and to get different investors in, because changing a perspective and adding, as a company evolves, essentially getting more people in and different views is what I'm trying to say is crucial, right? So always evolving that and surrounding yourself with new people is important. So now next year we'll be fundraising again. So that's part of a process to take it to the next level. But right now it's all about sustainability. It's not necessarily about raising more money to grow fast. It's right now our business is all about making sure that we're profitable, we sustain ourselves, we don't need necessarily anybody else to come in and invest. And the point where we're raising investment is because it really makes sense and it's a strategic partnership that will help us to really move forward. So we don't want investment to just burn cash now. So the ecosystem has changed a lot. I'd say over the last couple of years since COVID. So profitability and scalability, unit economics.
Metrics now for the investors to look at too.
I mean, if your unit economics don't make any sense, before you could have got away with it if there's a big total addressable market and your product is sexy enough. We'll worry about the unit economics later. But now it's literally from day one. There's a very different outlook.
I personally would have thought that would always be the case. Like you would always need the unit economics to be in check.
Logically, yes. But the reality of VCs also
industries, they don't have
VCs have pressure, right, as well to execute and to deploy funds. And they know most of that money probably isn't going to grow. But as long as they're making 10 to 20% of those investments work, and fundamentally there's a good opportunity there, they run, right? And historically, there's businesses like Uber that still don't make any money. Right? And how long have they been around? Do the unit economics necessarily work?
Depends.
Right?
The cliche.
It doesn't take the valuations that we used to get back in the day, essentially, for those kind of companies without great unit economics just don't exist anymore. So unless you've really got to transform your business to make it profitable and sustainable, to be able to warrant a solid valuation. Otherwise, if your business is good and there's an opportunity there still, even if everything else isn't quite there, I'm not saying you won't get the investment, but you will get squeezed a lot in terms of your valuation.
Right.
You did mention that you have presence now in Saudi also. So geographical expansion is a significant milestone for any startup.
Yeah.
Growth, it shows scalability. How has your journey and experience here in the UAE helped you to develop the market in Saudi?
Obviously there's some fundamentals of a business that translate everywhere, but each market is very, very different, actually. And even though we're neighbors effectively, the mentality in each market is still quite very different, I would say. And the reason we've gone towards a B2B play in Saudi versus a B2C play is because of that. So the Saudi market, when we launched it, wasn't quite ready for a B2C platform the way we wanted to play in the game. And it was ready for a car rental aggregator to go in and to put economy cars on the road mass. But where we wanted to play was more similar to what we're doing here in the UAE, and just the ecosystem isn't quite there. So what we did was focus on, and again, because where we were as a business, we didn't necessarily have the funds to grow that B2C presence fully. So you got to pick your battle. And so B2B was our focus because obviously you're putting more cars on the road. You're dealing with one entity, one person to chase the payments and all of this kind of stuff. And it's more streamlined. So you need less people to make that happen. And ultimately you can put a whole bunch of cars on the road through one company. So Saudi has grown in that way, which is, pretty low touch and easy to manage. And here where we have our core team and are able to, manage a full rental operation and get those cars on the road, and we have the right structure, we've grown on a B2C front. Obviously, there's a huge opportunity in Saudi to do what we do here. And as I said, 2024 is a year that we'll start to make that happen. But again, it's like you could do everything that you do in each market and try and launch multiple markets at the same time. But the reality is if you put too much resource in another market and you lose focus of your core market, then you're not doing yourself any favors, because you could be in 5 markets but not have the right budget or resource and stretch yourself too thin. Focus is always key. Look at what resources you have in reality and try and focus there and make that a success and not spread yourself too thin, I guess. However, going back to your original point, do investors like it? Of course, because they want to see that you've got a total addressable market that makes sense. If you're just in one market, it doesn't carry the same weight, I guess. So having that structure and legal structure set up in multiple markets is definitely appealing.
For sure.
So you mentioned you were very aligned with your investors, particularly because they had experience in, I suppose, the automotive industry, and they'd done stuff like this before. What I was curious was, how were you able to change your business model while still keeping them on board? And on top of that, how were you able to make them invest even more after flipping the script kind of? Because I would imagine that they were investing into that particular business model, or was it just the idea and it doesn't matter how you get there? But
I guess we never really changed the idea, actually, Sam. So our idea was always to be a car subscription player that puts new cars on the road and allows, it's an alternative to ownership or leasing. That's ultimately where we play. We're not an alternative or an easier way to get a car rental. There's no value in that kind of business. So, car rental aggregator plays on very small margins, and ultimately all they are is a platform that connects you to somebody else that provides you the vehicle. So our vision, to get to our vision though, we had to play in the aggregation space.
Okay.
Because we were small, we didn't have the funds. Again, it's like, how do you take that in steps and eventually get to the point you need to get to? So we leveraged car rental companies to get inventory to fill the app so it looked full, and we built our business, our first clients based on this. Within 1 year, we did a partnership with, without naming names, with one of the big dealership groups here, and we started to get cars from them, brand new from the dealership and leased to our customers.
Okay.
And we slowly, obviously, we trickled that in slowly, and then we proved that business model worked and raised more money to fund that business model as well.
Right.
But the idea was always there, you know, it was just part of a journey to kind of get there. And now, when you look at our app and our offering, I think there are 4 cars only out of 52 options, which are cars that come from a car rental company, and we only partner with 1.
Wow.
Okay.
We used to have 10, and now we only take cars from 1 car rental company, only 4 models. That is it. Everything else is all Carasti car rental inventory, which we source direct from dealerships, and that's why the prices are as good as they are, because we're cutting out the middleman, let's say, and doing deals direct.
Wow, fantastic. That's really interesting, because I can imagine, like, to begin with, and this, like, obviously isn't the route you took, but like for investors to get on board with something that's so capital intensive of having those cars, it's not something investors would want to go for. But perhaps as the company gets more established, then it makes sense to do so.
Yeah. Look, there's always it's a process. You start asset light when you move into a hybrid model like where we are now, and eventually any successful car subscription platform that you see globally works on a hybrid model. So they don't own all their cars, they're leasing some as well. So they're kind of back-to-back leases, but they take responsibility for that vehicle, right? And then there's part of the cars that they're owning that make more sense, which is generally the bread and butter of a company, the stuff they sell the most of. If you're buying that in bulk, obviously, from an OEM, from a manufacturer or a dealership group, you're going to get more, better discounts. And so running with that and keeping growing that portion of cars with that particular manufacturer will obviously make you a preferred supplier, and you keep driving down the price point there, right? So your purchasing power is important, right? So again, you cannot do that when you have zero purchasing power. At the beginning, you're nobody. You're like, oh, hello, I've got 2 cars on the road. It's like, can I buy 1 car from you? You're like, okay. It's like just me or you walking in as an end consumer, right? Yeah. So it just doesn't work. It's just all part of a journey, I guess. As you grow, you're able to turn on certain things, and you just have a lot, you can negotiate more, because ultimately you've built something which has worth, and you're talking much bigger numbers.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about growth and all the factors that go into that. But one factor I feel like we've missed upon is like the team behind that.
Yeah.
And I remember every time I'd come into the office, I'd see new faces, and everyone was so excited. And I'm sure they still are. I just mean like back when I when I was like interacting with everyone. What is it that you're looking for in the team? Is it just like a shared vision for the project, or like what is it that you look for in employees?
I mean, it depends at which level you're hiring. Obviously, an understanding of what we're doing and why it's important is crucial. But actually, for me, the most important thing when hiring is just attitude. It's like, it's not even about understanding industry. It could be someone that comes in from a completely different space, but they have a cognitive ability to understand and the attitude to want to learn and to make stuff happen. Yeah. And that is it, because everything else can be taught, as long as the attitude is there at the beginning.
Coachability aspect.
Coachability, but, nice, humble, relaxed people that won't cause you problems. That's the
no troublemakers.
But you want to build a family, right? This is it. We don't want to be arguing between us. I mean, every family argues, even the best family. But the point is that you want to make sure that you're bringing in honest, genuine, caring people, because if they don't care for each other, how are they going to care for the customer? And that's ultimately all I wanted, is to be able to redefine the customer experience for anything to do with the automotive space, but in general, even the UAE, because it's never really had the best reputation for, customer care. And, when you're calling call centers, it just, most of the time people don't even understand what you're trying to ask or what the problem is. And it is a bit of an uphill battle. So we didn't want to offer that, you know. So we've really focused on getting a team that genuinely, passionately cares about the customer and making sure that they're happy.
But the first hires are usually more difficult than the follow-on ones, right? Because once you know that you're funded publicly, people know that this is a startup where it's going somewhere. But the first ones who believe in the idea, is that a bit of a tricky situation?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, my co-founder, Mike, is a very good friend of mine, and we've known each other for years, and so there was a lot of trust there. And, you know, that was basically the first quote unquote hire, not really a hire, but, you know, a partner in crime, let's say, to build this. You know, I think if you've got a good partner in crime that you can really trust and rely on, then the rest of the team that you bring in, ultimately, they've got to believe in it. But again, it's all about that attitude, and you can pass on a lot of what's needed. Okay. Our first hire was a guy called Colin, actually, that came on board, and he's our operation manager, and came from a car rental space. And actually, Colin knew a lot more than I did about the car rental space and the ecosystem and his network within that ecosystem here. I'd never dealt with car rental companies before, never been in the automotive industry. This is just an idea that came out of my own pain, and I thought there's got to be a better way of doing something. But I didn't necessarily have the experience. I just kind of put my common sense of, you know, various areas of business together, try to create something that was a nicer experience. And then I brought in people that understood that. So I think hiring, you know, smarter or with more experience than you in certain areas where people can add value is crucial at the beginning. And then honestly, we started to hire through referrals, and that's how we got such a good team. Right. It was because, I've worked with this person before, and you know, I know her attitude, it works, and you know, she's loyal, whatever. So we'll bring her on board, and we'll bring her on board, and we'll bring her on board. So it just, you know, then everybody starts to refer all the great people they've worked with, they have good relationships with. Okay. So they kind of know each other. We start to form a sense of community and purpose. And then obviously the momentum that you build in a startups, thankfully we grew quite quickly, and there was really good momentum and energy behind it. And therefore the team kind of gels around that as a big excitement behind the project and what you're doing, and people stick with you. Yeah. And the majority of people we brought on at the beginning are actually still with us. We lost a few good ones on the way, obviously. That happens. People move on. But you know, it's good to see that, you know, the core team which we hired at the beginning actually is all still with us.
That's how you know you're fostering a good culture.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, touch wood. So look, I hate to do this because there's obviously a lot more we can keep talking about, but the time is dwindling down. Is there any sort of like last nugget of knowledge you would leave with the viewers?
Last nugget of knowledge. Oh, I would say if you're thinking of starting up a business, do it, because it's the best experience that you will have, and you will learn a lot from it. I've never learned so much in my life in any of my previous jobs. However, make sure you have your personal runway is good, and you can sustain yourself for 12 to 18 months, because you never know what happens in a business, right? Most businesses, unfortunately, fail. And no matter how good you think your idea is or how good you think your capabilities are, there's a big chance that it might go wrong. So protect yourself, because if you protect yourself financially and you plan financially for yourself before you go into doing it, you've got better headspace to be able to actually make the business a success. If you're worried about money and everything else, you might actually fail simply because of that point, not because your idea is not good. But because you're like, I need to go back into a corporate job because I can't afford to actually do this full time. And if there's no focus, no dedication, generally, as a rule of thumb, it never really works. Sometimes it can do, obviously. There are exceptions. But yeah, that would be my one nugget, really, to leave you guys with.
Cool.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Super valuable. Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you guys.
Yeah, it's been our pleasure.
Cheers. Pleasure was mine.